Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. Hello and welcome. This is episode 17 of Brilliant Balance. I was thinking about this episode this morning when by 8 a.m., when I sat down to get my workday started, I realized that I had already played about 5 different roles that morning. I had been a mom. I had been a seamstress because we had a little repair job to do on a dress for one of my daughters. I had been a wife. I had been a woman who was committed to her own personal well-being because I'd gotten up and worked out. I'd been an entrepreneur. I'd been a friend. All of these roles had already surfaced, and it was 8 a.m. So we're just getting started, right? There's lots more that are going to unpack over the day. And it's so connected to what we're going to talk about today, because what we're going to cover today is the roles that we play and how sometimes the rules that we assign to each one of them trip us up. I would be totally remiss if I didn't kick this off by giving credit to the woman who really gave me my aha moment on this topic, and that's Jen Hatmaker. If you don't know her work, she's a prolific author, really hilariously funny. And she wrote a book a long time ago when she was first getting started called Makeover, Revitalizing the Many Roles You Fill. We'll drop the note to that in show notes, the link to that book. But in that book, she really dropped some wisdom that landed hard with me when I read it a number of years ago. And this might surprise you, but she was sharing a passage from the Bible. It was like Mark 2:22. And in it, he makes a reference to wineskins. And that was a concept I did not know about, even though I love wine. So it really triggered an aha moment, and it stayed with me ever since. And so I'm going to get into that story as we go through this episode today. But let me kind of set up where we're going here, and then we'll get into wineskins and all things associated, okay? So what we're going to talk about today are the roles that we play and how we play them. And here's my belief. My belief is that often when we adopt a role, we do it the way someone else did, or someone else taught us, or someone else told us to do. Right down to the little details of how we execute that role. Like maybe whether or not you measure your laundry detergent before you add it to the machine, or whether you just pour it in there. And I'm betting as you're listening to that, you might not have even realized there were options here. Or maybe you use Tide Pods now, right? And you don't have to think about this anymore. But think back to the days of liquid detergent. When you were doing laundry, did you measure it into the cap, or did you just pour it into the machine? And as a former laundry marketer, I will tell you, there are gluggers, that's what we call them, and there are measurers. And both think the other one is certifiably insane. So this is a great example of rules. Having a right way of doing something that we believe is a rule associated with that process or with that role. And the premise we're working with today is that as we live out our roles, the many of them that we play, we may be using a very strict rule book. And honestly, it may be one that's just not that helpful. We're kind of going through our day as though there's a referee keeping score who might show up and call a penalty if we do it the wrong way. But it's just us, living out our lives the way that fits us. So if we can fully internalize that there really aren't rules for how we play these different parts in life, then we get some freedom that is not really accessible in any other way. So here's the concept. The concept is that as women, we are probably holding on to outdated images of the ideal woman. The culture that we're in has changed, but the processes that we're following haven't, okay? And it often comes down to the way our mother or our grandmother or another influential woman in our life did things. But our world is very different from their world, right? So if you think about the expectations you have of how you behave in your marriage or with your children or in your career or in your community or with your health, if you are following a pattern that was established because someone did it that way a long time ago, then you could end up in a corner that you can't get out of, right? A trap where the expectations just don't align with your current reality. So here was the story that Jen shared in her book that she took out of a chapter in the Bible. And it was a story about what happens when you are aging wine. Okay, so apparently, a long time ago, when they were going to age wine, they would take a goat skin, of all things, and pour this new wine into a goat skin. And as the wine expanded, as it fermented, it would stretch the goat skin along with it. A new goat skin had elasticity. When they poured this new unfermented wine into it and allowed it to ferment, the goat skin would expand. But what would happen if you poured new unaged wine into a goat skin that had already been used? It had already been stretched. Well, what happens is it explodes. The new wine has to have room to expand and stretch and find its shape. And if it is poured into a goat skin that has already been used, it will burst. And the assertion that she made that was my aha moment was, we are the wineskins. As younger, still stretchable women, we have to have the freedom to expand and morph and change our shape as new responsibilities and technologies come into the picture. And if we are trying to put all that new progress, all that technological progress, and now we have iPhones and we have airplanes we can get anywhere, and we have children in activities that take 40 minutes to drive to, that our grandmothers did not have. And we have Amazon Prime, and we have all these things available to us. If we try to pour that life into a model that has already gone through its expansion, that our mothers did or our grandmothers did or our mentors did, we will explode. There is no room for all of those things to come in and to expand. And that was an idea, a visual image that just stopped me in my tracks when I was first exposed to it. And I want you to really think about, where in your life might you be trying to incorporate all the complexity of your modern life into a model that was not designed for this time and this age, this era. And I want to give you a pathway of how to sort of manage this, right? So let's say you do that assessment and you realize, I am, in fact, trying to live up to the way, my grandmother made pie crust from scratch, or, apparently in my grandmother's household, everything was made from scratch, which is where I get my deep love for cooking. But if I think about having to every single day wake up and make bread from scratch and go out and gather eggs and go out and milk a cow, and these are literal realities that my grandmother 2 generations ago did every day. And in fact, my mother, as a young child, grew up in that exact same environment. I didn't. That's not what I did as a child, but that's how recent those changes have come into effect. So while for me, it's fun and nostalgic to bake a pie and make the pie crust from scratch, or bake bread and make it from scratch, it's a novelty that fits into my life every now and again, not something that I'm doing as a matter of my daily practice. So you think about how you can honor the traditions and the lineage without holding yourself to the standard that your life will look exactly the same way.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
So what do we do if we are trying to figure out, is one of the reasons that this is all feeling so hard that I am trying to live up to a model that no longer applies? Well, there's a few things that we can do. The first really critical thing is to figure out where your model came from. You have to take some time to think and to discover, what is the source of the rules that you're living under? Someone or something influenced you to design the role in this way. Who was it? What were the experiences that you had that locked in as this is how we do it? What were the observations that you made of what worked and what didn't work? What feedback did you get or messages did you get that solidified into the rules that you're using to shape this role? Because once you have that identified, right, once you've figured out where did your model come from, then you can better appreciate it for what it really is. And what is it? It's someone else's model. It was the right model for her, which gives you that operating freedom to design your own model that's right for you. Again, I'm going to use my life. If you look at 2 generations, my grandmother was a wife and a mother of a large family who lived on a farm and did hard physical work every day to keep that farm running and to keep her family healthy and fed and educated and all of those things, and to be a supporter to the family business. My mother was an elementary school teacher who had her summers off, who took 7 years off when I was a child to be a full-time parent, and then worked less than full-time and then went back full-time, but was still done at 3 every day and was home during the summers. Just look at the professional threat. And had 1 child. My mom had 1 child. So if I look at those 2 models, I already have 2 vastly different ways that I could choose to parent or I could choose to make my professional contribution. And my job is to do the second thing on the list here, which is to design my own model. So figure out where your model came from. What were the norms? What were the rituals that were associated with those roles? But then blend them into your own model. You decide what to keep and what to let go of. What worked 30 years ago or 60 years ago is not the same thing that's going to work today. We have to choose to be new wineskins. We have to be able to stretch to accommodate the world as it's evolving around us. I'm talking about these roles as mother, but these apply to any role. Again, if I think about the way my grandmother behaved as a wife and what the expectations were that she had of herself, and then my mother, and then me, there's an evolution of the level of partnership in our household, the way roles and responsibilities are split between our spouse and ourselves. What are we even allowed to do? What are the careers that are available to us today versus what were available to our mothers or to our grandmothers? The design of our own model has to incorporate all of that. The choices, the freedoms, the evolution, the context that we're living in. And so that's the second step. Once we've identified where our model came from and where maybe there's some friction points because of that, then we can truly move into designing our own. Well, how do you design your own? This is the third piece. Designing our own is best done by following principles, not rules. So I started out today saying roles don't have rules. But we're acting like they do. We're acting like there's a rule book that we have to follow. Not so. But it would be beneficial to have principles. Okay, so what's the difference? Well, a principle internally motivates you to do something. You decide what the principle is. It's driven by a belief system that you have. Whereas a rule externally, like compels you to do it, generally through fear of some kind of punishment, like something bad is going to happen if you don't do it. So rules externally driven, and they're sort of derived by the things someone else has deemed to be good or to be right. So if we're following rules, we're doing it because we think we're supposed to. If we're following principles, we're doing it because we want to, or because it feels right to us. So if we set up the principles, the really cool thing is they will feel exactly right for us. And principles also are a little less hard and fast. So they give us the chance to take different specific actions, but still remain in alignment with the principle. Let's look at an example. Imagine if the speed limit on the highway was, if it's a rule, it says it's 65. If it's a principle, it might say as fast as is safe for the traffic and the weather conditions and the level of the driver's focus. So under that principle, some people may be able to drive 80 on one day in one set of conditions with one level of focus, and some people may need to drive 25 under that same principle. It allows you the flexibility to say, based on the circumstances, based on the context, I may need to flex here, okay? Let's use a home mothering example. If my principle is to feed my family healthy food and to leverage mealtime as like an opportunity for connection, and I will tell you that is one of my principles, then often that will play out as me preparing a home-cooked dinner, getting out the dishes and the placemats and the silverware and the glasses and setting everybody around a table at the same time and having a conversation. That is most often how I will choose to execute that principle. But it could look like everyone eating a pot of soup in shifts because of their practice schedules. It could look like my husband preparing a meal for them because I'm traveling. It could look like us breaking out the panini maker and eating standing around the island, right? If it's not a rule that it involves sitting at the table, using the dishes, using the glassware, preparing the meal from scratch, if it's not a rule, then we have a little bit of room to maneuver, right? We can still get the essence of what we're trying to accomplish. So every time you find yourself constricted or constrained by a role, and you hear yourself saying, a good mother would XYZ, or a good wife would XYZ, or a good business owner would XYZ. Anytime you hear yourself saying that, check in. That's kind of a clue that you may be operating under a rule, and you may need to soften it into a principle. And then secondarily, you may want to check yourself that you're the one who set the principle. That it is something you truly believe. Now, I want to say this. This is kind of a secondary point for today's topic, but it's important that sometimes you're not feeling good because you're actually out of alignment with your own principles. You've already done the work of saying, nope, that's not because my mother did it that way or my grandmother or the first boss that I had or whatever. It's because I want to do it that way. I've designed my own role. I've established my principles, and I'm still out of alignment with them. Too often, I'm feeling uncomfortable because I'm not aligning my actions with what I really believe. That's a different topic. That's a different episode, right? We'll talk about that one someday because there's a very different course of action there. The specific slice that we're trying to hone in on today is when the reason you're feeling frustrated is because you are trying to live up to somebody else's standard that you have no business trying to live up to. It's just not right for you. It's outdated. It does not fit. It will not stretch. So that's what I want to sort of leave you with is, I want you to go out into your week thinking about what role am I playing right now in this moment? And if I'm feeling friction or discomfort or unease or pressure, especially pressure, I want you to go back through these 3 steps. Figure out, what is the model that I am living under? Where did it come from? Where did I hear this, that I'm supposed to do it this way? And then I want you to ask yourself if that is right for you. Does it fit into the model you need to craft for your way of living out that particular role? And then I want you to establish principles for the role, not rules. Principles that are a little softer, but that importantly you create for yourself. So, will that guilt still raise its head from time to time? Yes. You'll still feel sometimes like, it could be better than this. Wouldn't it be awesome if I could do it the way my mother did because I so appreciated it as a child? Or do it the way my grandmother did because it was so healthy and simple. But this framework will make it a lot easier for you to design the role that you're choosing to fulfill. So you can really get it all done gracefully, right? And that's what we're after. So take that out into the world with you this week and play with it and see where it leads you. I would love for you to share your experience with me. If you haven't already, I'm inviting you to come and hang out with me and a whole cohort of great women who are seeking their own brilliant balance in the Brilliant Balance Facebook group. You just go to Facebook, search for Brilliant Balance. You'll find us in there. And tell us how this is going. Share your experience in reshaping your roles, reshaping your ability to get it all done gracefully. So speaking of getting it done, next time, what we're going to do is shift to the concept of to-do lists. A lot of us are living by to-do lists. And sometimes those to-do lists never seem to get done. There are 1 or 2 underlying causes of why that often seems to be the case. The to-do lists just sort of sit undone. So we're going to dig into that next time and see if we can get some forward momentum there. Hopefully, I will see you in the Facebook group. I will talk to you next time about to-do lists. And in the meantime, go be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.